Hi, sustainability folks. Do you know each of us, when we work together, can solve the climate crisis? It is not government, industries, NGOs, but each person's contribution which will help us solve this crisis. Here's a video to budget your carbon emissions. Now, back to solving the climate crisis. We budget for financial goals, and now it is the time we shift our focus to climate budget. We need to set up goals to minimize our carbon emissions. This is to tackle climate change through demand-side management. Remember, we are the ones causing climate change. Industries, transport, and other sectors enable us to create it. Please note, this will impact the economy, but the intent is not to bring economy down, but to balance it based on buying what's really required. And this will enable saving your costs that can be used for investment in renewable or sustainable funds to create a better place. The data in this video is provided by EPA for supply chain emissions. These were made for industries by EPA, but I suggest using this. Other countries can use this or use the Quantize Suite tool, a non-governmental tool to monitor your personal emissions. It is a tool which works similarly, but I would advise using this for other countries. So we will learn. A. How much do you contribute to climate change? B. Setting a target. C. Decide how much you would like to contribute. D. Compare with other countries what the CO2 per capita is. This may very well be the path to solve the climate crisis. Develop a carbon budget. Before I start, this is the key issue. We drive the supply chain and associated pollution every time we buy. This is shown in the presentation as an example. Please see that at each step how pollution is created. Imagine this: if I am buying a product from other part of the world, how the transport emissions will be high. Unfortunately, we aren't measuring this, but know that buying locally is better. Moving to the next slide now. It shows the per capita CO2 emissions in some of the key countries. Now, this is a 2005 value and a projected 2030 value. Source is World Bank. Find the link in the description to know how your country stands with respect to CO2 per capita. Now, what does the US EPA supplier emission factors of US commodities have? Key from when the product or service was created until buy out, all the CO2e emissions are covered in it. CO2e means it contains all types of GHG emissions, not just CO2. Now, look at this table. We have commodity substance which contains CO2, methane, nitrous oxide, and other GHG. It has the units in the next and followed by supply chain emission factors. Use the supply chain emission factors with margins. This includes emission until it is out of the factory/industry gate before it reaches you. There is another concept of life cycle assessment, which is emissions from cradle to grave, but there are some softwares for it. The data is not high on accuracy since it uses a significant amount of data, and you can read about how they have arrived at these factors based on the website. Let's see how to calculate the total GHG from the table. Here is an example of one of the commodity farms. Note that they have differentiated between types of food. Also, remember this is one of the commodities that causes emissions. See it against the total spend and you will know how much CO2 has been released due to buying that commodity. You can see what type of GHG is accounted. Note that there is one on other GHGs. Next column is the kg/2018 US dollars purchaser price. So this is column which lets us know the emissions based on spend of a commodity. Usually we use an inflation since it is 2018, but suggest to use this since it takes time to process the data, so we will never have one for the current year. Now, supply chain emission factors without margins is cradle to the point of production. Then we have emission from production to point of sale. The one which we will use is supply chain emission factors with margins, that is all emissions from cradle to point of sale. When you download the file or access it, you will see it in the worksheet. I have tried to calculate the emissions, and what you can do is see the factor highlighted in yellow that needs to be used for the GHG calculations. GHG and CO2e are interchangeably used, but it means the same here. See commodities which are high in GHG like air transport, farms, and also which are low like data processing, etc. Use these factors. Similarly, in the next, you can see minimum except oil and gas as the highest. Oil and gas extraction is high. This may not be applicable to us, however, if you see utilities which will be applied for our case, it is one of the highest. You can revert to this slide if you do not want to do the calculation. Just to let you know how this was done, we need the CO2e or total GHG, so we need to multiply it with GWP, which is the global warming potential for each gas, to get the total GHG. So multiply GWP with the supply chain emission factors with margins to get the CO2e. Add all this and you can use this to multiply with the spend to get the emissions for the commodity spend. We do the rest for other commodities and you will get the total emissions. Now if this is just for you, then this would be the CO2 per capita, else you need to divide with the number of persons sharing this spend. See the commodity spend in categories and now multiply with the CO2e using the earlier calculations, and you will know your contribution to climate change. Hope it's less. Now you can compare this with the World Bank data on CO2 per capita and based on the income and understand where you are in your country and rest of it. Set a budget based on this for the next year and control your emissions. It is an investment for our kids' future. Leave your comments below. You would also have developed a heat map to show where your maximum emissions are, so you can try controlling it. Let's begin.